You've probably heard of the affordability crisis. Everything is too expensive, wages are not going up, the kids are accepting a fate where they're never gonna own a home, and the kids are not okay, at least not with that. Basically, it's just hard to get by. Then things get really weird. We're being told mixed messages on why this is all happening. The old narrative was that the problem was single-family homes. Then we heard that major investment firms were buying up all the single-family homes. We're told there's just not enough homes to go around. But then we also find that red tape is stopping the construction of new homes. And then we get things like this. Trump comes out, and Trump goes and speaks to the millionaires and billionaires of the World Economic Forum and makes it sound like some big scam and forever rent is now off the table. Watch this.
In recent years, Wall Street giants and institutional investment firms, many of you are here, many of you are good friends of mine, many of you are supporters. Sorry to do this, Joe, I'm so sorry. But you've driven up housing prices by purchasing hundreds of thousands of single-family homes, and it's been a great investment for them. Often as much as 10% of houses on the market. You know, the crazy thing is a person can't get depreciation on a house, but when a corporation buys it, they get depreciation. Okay, that's something we're going to have to think about too. I don't know if too many people think about that. You buy a corporation, they buy 500 houses, they buy hundreds of thousands, they buy 500 houses, they can take depreciation. A person sweats and works and buys one house, they can't. But homes are built for people, not for corporations, and America will not become a nation of renters. We're not going to do that.
And that's true also. In some parts of the United States as we speak, corporations own more than 20% of the properties. So count any 5 houses, and it's likely they own at least one of them. Now, this has been going on for a long time. Part of it goes back to the 2008 financial crisis. Basically, well, millions of Americans defaulted on their mortgages, they lost their homes, and institutional investors, it's companies that own many single-family rental homes, they bought them up, a lot of them, and they turned them into rentals. And this has been driving up the prices ever since. According to the Government Accountability Office in 2024, they said this, quote, "Researchers found that institutional investors may have contributed to increasing home prices and rents following the financial crisis." And guess what? Well, it only got worse since then. Of all the single-family homes that were sold in the second quarter of 2025, real estate investors bought about 1 out of every 3. And also, as Trump mentioned in his speech in Davos, there are other benefits the corporations get, in particular when they buy homes like this. That's what he was talking about with depreciation. Big businesses get added benefits on this that you don't get. Basically, the IRS, they let you write off a portion of a home's cost when it's being used as a rental property. The difference for corporations, though, is they get more access. And so they can use homeownership and rental properties to cut taxes, not just on the rental properties themselves, but just overall. And so they have a lot of incentive to buy up homes. And that's also why what just happened matters so much. Basically, the jig is up. And alongside his speech at Davos, Trump signed an executive order. This was framed as an order to protect the American dream. And what it does, it bans large-scale investors from buying single-family homes. But here's something else. Most of us have never been told this issue even existed. In fact, if you were to read media reports from a few years back, the narratives were entirely different. And the fact that it was being blamed for the high cost of homes was the suburbs. They were saying single-family homes, the old dream of the white picket fence and a piece of earth of your own, they were saying that was the cause of this. How dare you dream of the American suburb? And the narrative was, to solve that problem, we all need to settle for less. Be less greedy, accept a future of apartments and high-rises. And this also ties in with zoning laws, where local politics, they decide whether or not single-family homes can even be built in the first place. So basically, the homes were being sold to big investors, regulations put a cap on the construction of more homes, and to make the supply problem even worse, other policies allow for mass migration to increase the demand of those homes. So just basic economics, right? Supply and demand. You create a monopoly, you buy up the product, you squeeze the supply, and then you artificially ramp up demand. What do you think is going to happen? Well, exactly what we saw happen. The prices go through the roof. And happy shareholders, well, they make happy businesses. Here's a piece from CNN in 2023 putting the blame on suburbs and the single-family zoning laws. Basically, what they said is the problem goes back to 1910, when U.S. cities launched new policies that would, quote, lay the roots for the severe housing shortage today, single-family zoning laws. And it adds that, quote, your house could be your dream home, but could that dream come to an end if someone built a factory right next door? And if you tried to sell your house, who would buy it? It says any pollution or noise could easily drift over to your house, and selling and moving someplace new, well, it could seem nearly impossible. And thus it says, zoning laws protected millions of Americans' home values, stopped development of projects that could turn small villages into larger towns and larger towns into cities, and delegated control to local homeowners and government over how land in their neighborhoods was used. That's CNN. And the article explains that zoning laws have a basic concept. It makes it so that factories can be built in one part of the town, in another you can have the apartment buildings, and in another area you can build single-family homes. It alleges these zoning laws protected the value of homes, they stopped the construction of apartments and factories in some areas, and those higher values, well, they mean higher prices. This often means more wealth, better safety, better schools. But then they raise another problem. Apparently, according to CNN, suburbs, single-family homes, they might just be racist. CNN writes that critics say zoning laws ended up being exclusionary, reinforced racial and class segregation, and shut the door to many Americans on home ownership. Now, I'd ask, who are these critics they're referring to? But I digress. Back to the point of zoning laws, though. The narrative sounds interesting, but if single-family homes were really such a big problem, why are massive corporations and investment firms buying them up and then treating them as investment pieces? If single-family homes are creating problems of exclusion and racism, then why was it okay for only the wealthiest of firms to snatch them all up? Are they the racists? And this has been the underlying debate for a while now. Back in February 2025, Scott Turner, that's the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, he announced that he was bringing an end to a policy that was squeezing zoning laws for single-family homes. And maybe CNN was right, because this actually did tie into racism. This was the Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing Rule from 2015. It was an Obama-era rule for the department. And basically, localities, they had to certify they had achieved a state of equity. That means no disparities between race, religion, sex, nationality, or disability when it came to access to parks, transportation, schools, business districts, and the like. In other words, no equity, no federal money. And yeah, corporations could still buy up all the single-family homes and then gouge us on rent. But remember, we're all equal under this. But when it comes to equity, some are just more equal than others, apparently. But that rule is also now gone. Secretary Turner told the New York Post at the time, terminating this rule restores trust in local communities and property owners while protecting America's suburbs and neighborhood integrity. And look, to be clear, Trump actually got rid of this policy before. Biden brought it back, but back in 2020, during Trump's first term in office, he explained it like this. He said, AFFH would have imposed a massive regulatory burden on localities, required high-density zoning, eliminated single-family zoning, and destroyed our suburbs. He said this overregulation of our suburbs would have harmed Americans' abilities to work, buy homes, and build lives for their families, including many minority communities. But here's where things get even more strange. The whole move to get rid of single-family homes, to bring an end to those racist suburbs, and to usher in an equitable future of high-rises and corporate landlord overlords, was actually part of something much larger. And it sounds crazy, but this actually was part of a publicly announced goal of the United Nations. In particular, that was Goal 11 of the Agenda 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, and it was titled, Make Cities and Human Settlements Inclusive, Safe, Resilient, and Sustainable. Basically, this held that sprawl makes it harder for people to access services like transportation. Basically, that Obama-era rule instituted globally. And so to fix that, they said, we need cities, tighter cities. And it also tied into broader programs with basically the same goal. At the World Economic Forum, this was also being discussed. One of the discussions was for what they call 15-minute cities. Everything you need, just 15 minutes away. No more sprawl. Its website describes as saying, quote, a new model for developing mixed-use, walkable communities known as the 15-minute cities is gathering momentum in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. And it was actually put into effect. This wasn't just some rumor. At the city level, some of the key discussions were actually going on at the C40 organization. What's that? That's a global network of mayors, and they include places like New York City, Los Angeles, Chicago, Houston, actually a lot of others even globally. They represent about 96 mayors of the world's largest cities. And it's in this place here where they present and agree to implement programs like this. In fact, here's the promo they made for the 15-minute city plan for C40. Watch this.
Before the recent lockdowns around the world, we led hectic lives with long commutes and not enough time to spend with our families and friends. Traffic polluted our air and smog blanketed our skylines.
What if it could be different? What if we could create a new normal where we reclaim our time, our health and well-being, and our communities?
This is the idea behind the 15-minute city.
Now, to make this clear also, this isn't just some random plan or crazy conspiracy. Policies on this are actually being put in place as we speak. In fact, the C40 website even notes some of the studies on this. This is Barcelona, this is Paris, this is Portland, Oregon. But there are even grander visions on how this can look eventually, right? Basically, no more sprawl, no more commutes. We could all live in high-rises where every service and every shop is just one short walk away. One of the more ambitious 15-minute city projects is actually being built in Saudi Arabia. They call it The Line. Check out this promo they had on it.
For too long, humanity has existed within dysfunctional and polluted cities that ignore nature. Now, a revolution in civilization is taking place. Imagine a traditional city and consolidating its footprint, designing to protect and enhance nature. The Line will be home to 9 million residents and will be built with a footprint of just 34 square kilometers. And we are designing it to provide a healthier, more sustainable quality of life.
Now, that's actually not science fiction either. It might look like it at first, but the initiative is under NOM. That's a new urban area planned by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and they already started to build it. Now, as things currently stand, though, it turned out to be a bit overly ambitious. I mean, they're still working on it, but they're scaling it back. The initial phase looked to house around 1.5 million people. The current estimate is now around 300,000. Now, we're not seeing anything like that in the United States, at least not yet. But there is a movement on this to move away from suburb. And in fact, even Trump had some visions on maybe a future city project. But instead of focusing on smart cities, mass surveillance, 15-minute cities, heavy regulations, he was envisioning high-tech libertarian cities as experiments in freedom and governance. Does anybody remember when he was talking about freedom cities? Instead of Agenda 2030, he actually called his plan Agenda 47. Now, back in 2023, Trump was proposing the United States should build around 10 of these freedom cities. In fact, he even made a video on this vision for his 2024 campaign. Watch this.
Almost 1/3 of the landmass of the United States is owned by the federal government, with just a very, very small portion of that land, just a fraction, 1/2 of 1%. Would you believe that? We should hold a contest to charter up to 10 new cities and award them to the best proposals for development. In other words, we'll actually build new cities in our country again. These freedom cities will reopen the frontier, reignite American imagination, and give hundreds of thousands of young people and other people, all hardworking families, a new shot at home ownership and, in fact, the American dream.
Now, that plan is actually still on the table, by the way. It ties into his attempts to open federal land to build new homes in Nevada, Oregon, Idaho, and Colorado. But back to that agenda to eliminate single-family homes and the alleged problems of zoning laws. Are zoning laws actually driving up prices? Are big business monopolies actually pushing people out of the housing market? Now, we used to have enough homes to go around. What happened? We're told the population is going down, not up. Construction has continued, although not as fast, and so by all means, we should have an overabundance of homes, not a lack of housing. So where'd all the houses go? If you turn to many other parts of the world where the political agendas and narratives are different, well, they don't actually blame the lack of available homes on single-family zoning laws. What they blame is mass migration. As I mentioned earlier, it's supply and demand. If supply is being constricted by government policy, then the average citizens need to struggle over who gets to have their share of that limited supply. Less supply, more demand, and what happens if you bring in more demand, more people? Well, prices go up, obviously. In Canada, this is actually part of the main discussion on the high cost of homes and on their housing crisis. As a Vancouver Sun opinion article states, quote, although some minimize it, immigration and housing prices are profoundly connected. Immigration policy is a form of housing policy. So what's the solution? Well, the editorial board of the Globe and Mail said this. They said immigration is rising, so will housing prices unless we start building a lot more homes. What a concept. You bring in more people, you need to build more houses for them to live in. Otherwise, well, what's going to happen? They compete over who gets the available real estate and the prices soar. If you import 10 million people, you need to build millions of new homes to accommodate them. Otherwise, you're going to have a price squeeze. Amazing. And look, that's also become a focus in the United States. Last year, November 2025, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, they actually issued a report saying this. They said mass migration, quote, has contributed to a significant increase in housing demand, thus driving up housing prices. In fact, it says in some markets, immigration has accounted for nearly all of the increase in housing demand in recent years. And it adds this, quote, this year's report shows two realities. The first is that economic growth has been insufficient to lift the wages of low-income renting families high enough to make rent affordable. The second is that national macroeconomic policies such as record immigration have combined to drive sustained high rent demand, which has continued to place upward pressure on rent prices. So with that said, it's fair to ask, what's actually being done about this? It's one thing to talk about problems, another to talk about, efforts towards solutions. Actually, there are a lot of efforts on this right now. States in particular, they're talking about ending property taxes for homeowners. Florida, they're actually at the forefront of this. Discussions are going on elsewhere, but it's mostly just the Republican-led states on that front. But aside from the plan to use federal lands to build more homes, Trump is also talking about 50-year mortgages. He's also working to cut red tape, and we could see the testing ground on that in Los Angeles. In Los Angeles, what he's saying is that local restrictions basically froze the attempts to rebuild from the Palisades fires. And so he's done something interesting. He issued an order, and the order basically federalizes the rebuilding of Los Angeles. The order says that while families and businesses struggle to get by, quote, state and local governments delay or prevent reconstruction by approving only a fraction of the permits needed to rebuild. And so as a solution, the order will start federally funded reconstruction projects for homes and businesses there, but without the restrictions and the local red tape. So what's really going on with the housing market? Why are homes so expensive? Basically, it's because of a hodgepodge of global agendas, federal equity programs, local red tape, and big old fat corporate interests. As George Carlin said, it's a big club and you ain't in it. And they were even able to inflate the value of all those assets, your home in this case, by squeezing new construction and then increasing the number of people competing for those finite resources. Now, it's not clear whether that was the intent to make money and increase the value of held assets, but without a doubt, that was the effect those policies had. It was great for business, but it's been terrible for the average person just trying to get by. But on that front also, things are also now changing. Red tape is getting cut, restrictions are getting more leeway, new homes are being built, and the large firms are no longer able to just buy them all up once they're on the market. Things are changing, and with this, well, we might just see a return to that white picket fence and the good old American dream.